Hey everybody, it's Tammy and welcome back to the Bionicle Custom Showcase. Today we're continuing to look at the Hau Nuva's adaptive mask as reimagined by Galva. Last time we checked out the Fantoka, so today let's check out the Mistika. Starting off with Hau Nuva's Pakari Nuva, this mask along with all the masks that you're going to see today was printed at a layer height of 0.025mm, and as you can see this continues to have the same issue with the axle being too large that we had on the prior masks. It's got some watermarks from washing, but otherwise it's a clean, sharp print. So let's compare it to the mask's other incarnations. So you probably noticed we've got slightly fewer masks to compare against today compared to the Fantoka because there were never any noble masks made or any flight versions. But if we look at the masks that we do have, it becomes immediately very obvious that this mask is not really a flight adapted Pakari Nuva so much as it's a stylized version of the original Pakari. I personally would have preferred for these masks to resemble the Nuva versions more. However, if I set that aside and accept it for what it is a very faithful recreation of the original Pakari mask. It keeps pretty much every distinctive feature from the 4 cheek vents on each side to the 3 vents on the forehead. It also has this longer mouth part, and where the original mask had a recess for where the stud connection was, this mask has a protruding circular detail which continues the motif seen on the previous masks. It is obviously a lot more streamlined and swept back than the original mask, which I like, and I don't know if this was the intention, but you could interpret these sweeping lines above and below the eyes as matching the crests on the 2003 Nuva mask. It does feature some additional holes at the top of the mask further back, and this could possibly be a nod to the original 2008 adaptive mask, which coincidentally for my money is possibly my least favourite of all the masks from 2008, because it looks nothing like any of the previous masks, and for me looks more like a cross between General Grievous and the Cloverfield monster. But anyway, let's see how this mask looks on Hau Nuva himself. So here is Hau Nuva as he appears in his default 2008 armour, and here is my modified version. We'll get to the mask in a moment, but just to go over all the changes I've made, I switched out all the sockets and fists, added a piece of armour onto the left bicep to make that symmetrical, and then I've moved the shield to the front of the arm. This shield can now be taken off separately and mounted on the forearm without interfering with the fins, which I have recoloured in silver along with the boosters on the legs to take out the red accent, and then I've replaced the red laser on the blaster with a green one, and I've also replaced the silver Rakshi limbs with dark bluish grey versions just to try and tie Hau Nuva's old colour scheme together. And so taking it all together with the mask, if I do bring in the 2002 Hau Nuva set, which looks tiny now by comparison, it does feel a little bit more connected thanks to the colour scheme and actually this mouth part, which I hadn't previously appreciated on the Pakari Nuva mask. But I think when you introduce his matter form, you really get the resemblance and it's a lot more satisfying. Definitely makes you appreciate the work that Galva put into making this design fit with the new aesthetic. But I do feel like he's missing something. Yes, that's much better. Next up we have the Kaukau Nuva. This print came out pretty well, still got the axle problem, and you will notice that there is a chunk missing in the left side of the cheek. This is because of an issue that I mentioned in the previous video where I accidentally clipped this with the Mirror Nuva in printing. Thankfully it's pretty shallow and quite near the back, so you can't really notice it. These pinholes are functional, but I will go into more detail about those in a minute. Looking at all of the versions of the Kaukau together, you can immediately see that this time a lot more cues have been taken from the 2002 Nuva mask. Right at the front you've got this recognisable triangular mouth area, which is actually common between both the Great and Nuva versions of the mask, so that helps tie them together. But where the 02 Nuva mask has these questionable nostrils, Galva has instead marked those areas with the protruding peg motif that was seen on the Kakama and Mirror Nuvas, which is really cool. The hoses coming out and around the sides of the masks also evoke the matter mask, whilst the ribbed texture harkens back to the Nuva version. Then you've got these ridges coming up the forehead just like on the 02 mask, with the vent at the top. And then on the forehead you've got the raised circle motif, which could almost be seen as repositioning the part under the scope on the adaptive version. Finally, not only does Galva's version of the mask have a single long eye opening, but it is in fact compatible with the Mari visor as well, which is genius because it gets to actually have a visor as well. I would argue that this mask is possibly the best mashup of the Great and Nuva versions, tied with the Kakama. Whilst the 2008 mask isn't very popular, I do like that Galva kept the pinholes, and I think the mask looks good even with them left open. Finally, I will also say there's a couple of small holes in the side by the pinholes. That may have been a design choice, but I imagine it was also pragmatic because the material would otherwise have gotten very thin. Anyway, let's see how it looks on the Toe of Water herself. So here's the stock 2008 Pakari Nuva from the Mistika line, As you can see, I've done what I like to do with some of my 08 Toa Nuva and put a Nuva chest armor piece on there. However, if we're going to do Pakari Nuva justice, I think we need to do a little bit more. Particularly if we bring in Pakari Nuva's original form now. If you've been paying close attention, you may have seen where we're going with this, because I've decided to give Pakari Mistika a significant colour overhaul. There we go, and I think that immediately looks so much better. Even the mask looks more agreeable to me, and this is not a very agreeable mask, to be honest. It's not the worst in the world, but it's definitely just not a Kaukau Nuva, is it, really? I've had to keep some of the parts in dark blue because they're just not available in matte blue, and I've had to switch the feet out as well, but that's fine, they're actually a bit more stable. And I've also given Gully a green laser sight as well, because I think it just looks better. So if I switch out the mask now, oh yes, this to me looks really good. It feels like Gully, but like she's been teched up, and I think that is exactly what you want from the Adaptive Nuva. This mask also looks right to me in terms of size for the Anika build. I think this really has the presence it deserves. I mentioned earlier that there were some issues with the pinholes in this mask. Whilst they do work and you can put the pins in there and they're pretty secure, they just don't have enough friction to actually hold them in place, really. So she mainly just has sad bunny ears. But if I hold them in place myself for a second, I think they work fine. I personally am happy to take them out though. I think this is the most faithful Nuva mask recreation so far. However, I think this may be given a pretty good run for its money by the final mask I've got to show to you. For this is Galva's Adaptive Hau Nuva. As you can see, I think this print came out really well. The footage is a bit wonky for some reason, sorry about that. I actually had pretty good luck on this mask with the axle. You can see it's pretty close to the Metru head. And I even remembered to take a photo of this mask with the primer coat on, which brings out all the lovely details. Anyway, let's see how this compares to other versions of the mask. It's worth noting whilst looking at these masks that as far as we're aware, in 2008, or rather in 2007 when these masks would have been designed, the designers didn't really know that these would have been the Toa Nuva. In fact, the original plan I believe was that they were going to be another incarnation of the Toa Mari. Which is why I think any similarities between the original 08 masks and the Toa Nuva's previous masks are purely coincidental. For example, the original Hau Mistika mask has this sort of grill across the mouth, which I will admit is very evocative of the original mask. But other than that, I'd say the only real similarity is the general presence of it, the smooth helmet-like vibe that it has. And when compared to the actual 2002 Hau Nuva, I don't think there's really any similarities at all. Which is why I find it so nice to look at Galva's version. You can instantly tell that this is supposed to be the same mask. It's got that iconic open mouth, but a small bit at the chin, which may actually refer back to the 2008 version. It's got these tube details coming up to the forehead and meeting larger structures at the back, much like the 2002 design. It's got the wider, rounder cheeks like the 2002 design compared to the original Hau. However, it does retain the vent at the top, and it's a subtle detail, but you can see very specifically some grill details on the cheeks, which subtly links back to the original Hau and of course the 2008 version. In addition, this mask has some kind of geometric and hole designs that kind of echo some of the shapes found on the more organic looking 2002 mask. And of course it's got the very distinctive brow common to both versions, but is brought forward slightly per the 2001 version. But that's enough about the masks, let's see how it looks on the Toa Nuva Fire himself. So this is the 2008 Hau Mistika set. For my money, I think Hau gets the best weapon of the Toa Mistika, if only because it actually is a weapon. Though as you can see, I've clearly switched out the sockets and the hands, which I think bring a lot more life to him. But I've also added the Nuva chest armor to Hau, and I think even these changes make him look a lot better. But you might be wondering, Tammy, did you repaint Hau like you did with Gully? Well, of course I did. Here is Hau in his classic matte red. But if we switch out the mask for Galva's version, this just looks so cool. I'm not gonna lie folks, this mask is like the reason that I am making this video in the first place. I saw this on Thingiverse and I was like, I have to print this off. It just makes him Hau, especially when you compare him to his 2002 character. It really makes you want to go one step further and give him like updated lava swords as well. I haven't done that, but I have gone one step further because as you can see, Hau is sporting some new shoulder armor. I've been wanting to show these pieces off and I chose Hau because quite frankly, his armor is really boring. These shoulder pauldrons are designed again by Galva. They are designed to go with the Toa Nuva, so they are inspired and supposed to invoke the original Nuva armor. And whilst I haven't used it together here, they are intended to work with the chest armor that I showed you on Pohatu in the previous video. Personally, I think these are great and they make Hau look just so much armored up. There are, however, some practical issues with them. They have good axle hole placement in that they have a setup very much like the Anika shoulder armour, which allows a bar to go through, and they also have an axle hole on the sort of the outside, so you could mount them at different angles if you wanted to. However, the sizing of these parts does severely restrict the amount of movement in the arms in terms of them being able to reach up, as they will pop off otherwise. Also, if your 3D printed parts are having some sizing or fit issues in terms of compatibility with official LEGO pieces, you may have some issues mounting these. As you can see, mine are actually attached without any axles or pins because they are actually slightly too tight, so they're able to hold on with friction alone. And the holes are actually too small for me to fit axles through there. So it's just something to bear in mind if you're printing these off. It's a little bit ironic given that the issue I've had with the mask is that the axles were too big. Going back to the mask, like a lot of the others in this series, I do wonder if it's a little bit too small. However, particularly in this context, given that it's got to fit between these kind of turbine thruster jet things, I think it works just fine. But which is your favourite of the 3 Toa that we've seen today, and which is your favourite of all 6? Personally, I think this range of masks and armour that Galva has designed really enhanced the 2008 Toa Nuva, and is really such a gift to fans who love these characters and want to make the sets do them justice. I do have other custom showcase videos planned, and I think you're going to like them. And the response to the previous video with the Fantoka was so great that it's given me some cool ideas for what I could possibly do with the Toa Nuva in the future. But those will probably take a while. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye!